Hello, and welcome back to Writing Tips. I'm your host, C. Alex Smith, but you can call me Sherry. You can find me on Substack or at my personal webpage. This is the third video in the Story Developer series. Today, we're going to take your ideas from August's month of brainstorming and put them to the test. We're looking for ideas that create a clear storyline and grab your readers and make them want to read your book. In this video, we'll be talking about 5 tests. The logline test, the freshness test, testing the conflict, examining the theme and its relevance to modern society, and something called hook, line, and sinker. How did your month of brainstorming go? Did you come up with several interesting story ideas? One really hot idea that is burning a hole in your brain and making your fingers itch? Great. Now let's see if those ideas are worthy of your time. That's right, your idea has to qualify to become a story. So we're going to put your idea through 5 tests before you invest your time in writing it. The first test will be from Dwight Swain's classic, Techniques of a Selling Writer. This book is indeed a classic for a reason. You should read the whole thing, but particularly the chapters about what readers are seeking from a story. Most people write a logline at the end of the process in order to sell their book to an agent or movie producer. Swain recommends creating the logline in the beginning to make sure you have all the elements of story that work together to create the potential for a real page turner. You can then use this line as your guiding light, the core concept of your story when you get lost in the drafting process. Eventually, you will rework this logline as an elevator pitch to give to an agent or anyone else who asks what your story is about. But for now, this is just for you to see where your story might be going. You don't need to delve into twists or character arcs or plot. You're simply conveying the core idea, the initial seed from which the plot, character, twist, turns, and ensuing conflict grows. Here are some rules for writing loglines. Loglines are only 1 sentence long. The shorter the better. Shoot for about 15 words. Don't use character names. Names don't tell you anything about the character, so they are wasted words that eat into your 15-word limit. Better to say a handicapped trapeze artist than Ramon Caravel. Try to tie together the big picture plot and the personal picture character arc for the main character. Read the one-line blurbs on the New York Times bestseller list, linked in the show notes below, to see how the experts do this. To write a great logline, you need to know the elements of your story. Start with the protagonist. The reader will experience your story through this character's eyes. Many stories have multiple points of view, but one character is seen more frequently, and the whole story seems to revolve around this character. There are a multitude of characters in The Lord of the Rings, but we experience the events of Tolkien's epic through Frodo. Which character has the most to lose in your story? Who changes the most during the story? That person is likely the main character or the protagonist. What is their job? Ballet dancer? Rodeo clown? If your protagonist doesn't have a job, write down their status in the world. They might be a modern high school student or a Gilded Age American heiress. Now, Come up with an adjective that sums up your protagonist. Brave, resourceful, blind, egotistical, hopeful, mysterious. For example, you might describe Luke Skywalker as a daydreaming, idealistic farm boy and skilled pilot. Now, tell me about the situation. What problem interrupts the protagonist's daily life and forces them to take some action? How has the world or his or her situation become a personal problem for the character? This is sometimes referred to as the inciting incident, and it often hints at the story's genre and mood. In Star Wars: A New Hope, it's the destruction of Luke Skywalker's adoptive family and the farm where he grew up. Until then, Luke does not need to act. Before that, he turns old Ben Kenobi's offer to go to Alderaan down. The protagonist generally takes action with a goal in mind. It could be something he wants to retain or protect or attain, which is endangered. His life, his love, his family, his home, his people all make great objectives. It doesn't matter whether he or she achieves this early goal, just that they have one. The destruction of Luke's home and the couple who raised him makes him want to honor his real father's memory by becoming a Jedi Knight. That is his long-term story goal. But his first short-term goal is to accompany Obi-Wan Kenobi to Alderaan to give Leia's father the Death Star plans embedded in R2-D2's memory. They never achieve this mission to Alderaan because Alderaan is blown up by the Death Star. But that task leads to the more important goals of joining the rebel fighter pilots and taking his first steps in working with the Force. And while you're at it, write down what the stakes are for the protagonist. What will happen to the protagonist if he fails to achieve the goal? The murder of his family makes it clear to Luke the stakes are very much life and death. Now, tell me what stands in the way of your protagonist achieving their goal. Standing in the way of the goal is called conflict, and it's usually the job of the antagonist to provide conflict. Make sure that you are providing real conflict and not just adversity to your protagonist. Adversity is an obstacle that the protagonist has to climb over to get to their goal. Conflict is provided by another character who wants to stop your protagonist. Characters in conflict interacting with one another are inherently interesting, and the dialogue of characters in active conflict keeps readers glued to the page. That willful conflict causes tension. Tension is when the reader worries. In this case, the reader worries the protagonist won't achieve their goal. Because they're uncertain if the protagonist will succeed, they have to keep reading. In Star Wars, the antagonist is one of Hollywood's most compelling villains, Darth Vader. Finally, the antagonist is responsible for creating the disaster that leads to the final confrontation between the protagonist and the antagonist in the climax. The disaster makes a difficult goal seem impossible. A good disaster also raises the stakes for the protagonist, which forces the protagonist to take action against the antagonist. Only through action can a character's soul be revealed. It's the destruction of Leia's homeworld and rebel base, Alderaan, that eventually leads the Death Star to the last rebel stronghold on Yavin 4. Luke must help destroy the Death Star before it can blow up Yavin 4 and what's left of the rebels. The stakes have been escalated from Luke's life or death to the life or death of the entire rebellion and the freedom of the galaxy. Write a sentence using your protagonist, inciting incident, and goal. The sentence doesn't have to be particularly well written. It just has to make sense and convey the meaning of your story. Here's an example for Star Wars. When his father is murdered by the Empire's stormtroopers, an idealistic farm boy teams up with his father's former mentor and joins a rebellion in order to learn the secrets of becoming a Jedi Knight, just like his father. Now, write a yes or no question containing the antagonist and the disaster. For example, when Darth Vader's Death Star threatens to blow up a planet with an important rebel base, will the farm boy's experience with the Force allow him to destroy the Death Star and save the rebellion? Now look at your sentence and your question together. Do they make sense together? Do they encompass your story's plot from beginning to end? Great! You've just created the guiding light for your story idea, the controlling premise. This should keep you from straying off track while you draft your novel. Now, before you take a big old bite out of this project, you better make sure it's fresh. That means some aspect of this idea is new to the reader. If your story involves using dragons to compete for a hotly contested throne, you better come up with an idea that is so out of left field and introduce it in the first paragraph, or the reader will just groan and put the story down, thinking it's a rip-up of House of the Dragon. So think about the idea you have for this story and answer these questions. What genre is the story? Has this been done before in that genre, or is your story totally original? If it has been done before, how is your version different? How will you surprise the reader with something they did not expect? How will your story stand out? Is it looking at something in a new way? Something that the reader won't see coming? Is it more clever, complex, terrifying, witty, soulful than what is available on the market already? Specifically, how so? You have probably heard the old adage, tension on every page. A large part, but by no means all, of adding tension to the story is conflict. Does your story sentence imply some sort of conflict? Will this conflict impact your protagonist's inner life so that the character can be revealed on the page? If your story sentence doesn't imply any conflict, you're in trouble already. But don't fret. The whole idea of this exercise is to find that out now so you can fix it before you spent a year writing your heart out. You will find I am going to encourage you to think about many parts of your story that the reader does not. But these parts are critical to getting the reader interested and keeping them riveted to your every word. Theme is a large element of story that you can never directly tell the reader, but you need to be aware of it every time you write a scene. So you should get your theme clear in your mind so it can guide your writing as you draft. Unfortunately, theme tends to be one of the hardest concepts for writers. One of the reasons theme is so hard is that most people are ill-informed about what theme is. Most books talk about theme as though it was one word or a short sentence. Themes can be that way, but only if they are fairly shallow, like Aesop's fables. The reason you are writing a story is likely because you want to talk about an issue with some complexity and gray areas. That sort of theme frequently requires an entire paragraph to reveal. Here are some examples from movies. There are a multitude of themes at work in The Lord of the Rings. The most prevalent is that power is more addictive than any other vice, and not only does it corrupt, it creates increasing unhappiness. Sure, those ruled by tyranny are obviously unhappy, but the powerful always want more power, and that is the source of their unhappiness and their undoing. In Casablanca, society demands sacrifice of each of the characters. Ignoring that demand may feel right in the short term, but the emotional cost of shirking your responsibility to your community is higher than you think. And in Star Wars, what makes a person with similar experiences and abilities as the hero turn to the dark side? What is it in a person that flicks that switch? Is it genetics? Fate? Love? Once someone has turned to the dark side, are they redeemable? Now, try to write down your theme. There are two ways to use a theme. Like Aesop's fables, you can sell your theme. This is trying to convince a large public to behave in a particular way. Then the theme is called the moral of the story, such as one should not lie, especially to magical creatures who will mete out a gruesome and over-the-top revenge. These themes are simple, and the point of the story is hard to miss. The problem is that the readers also don't miss that you are lecturing them about their behavior. Just like in real life, people resent being lectured. Unlike being lectured by a parent or an employer, they can put the book down and the lecture stops. The other way to use a theme is to explore a complex moral issue. The characters raise questions about the theme. Sometimes the actions and events lead to answers. More often they do not. They leave the reader to think about the theme more deeply, turning over what you have written in their minds long after they've put the book down. In reality, their minds never really put your book down. To do this, the characters must be a little unclear about the theme you propose. It is best, in fact, if you are a little unclear about all the questions your theme raises. Now, look at the paragraph describing your theme. Write down 5 questions this theme implies. Even if you already know what your answer will be, write down the question. Your character will have to ask and possibly answer that question for him or herself. Next, decide which questions you will leave unanswered for the reader to ponder. You can change your mind later, but always leave something for the reader to fret over. Unless you're in the habit of deceiving magical creatures, Aesop's fables do not seem realistic or even relevant to most people. So now, make sure your story is going to be relevant to the modern reader. How does this theme touch everyday life for most people? Does it challenge current belief systems and values? Is your exploration of this theme memorable in some unique way? Are you selling an idea or trying to argue one side of a complex issue? Or are you exploring a theme that's complex and multifaceted? People who are selling something in today's world are looked down upon, and it's difficult to make a novel that people want to read when you're selling a moral tale. Star Wars asks us, what makes a person turn to the dark side? What is it in a person that flicks that switch? Is it genetics, fate, love? And once someone has turned to the dark side, are they redeemable? This is a classic theme that will never go out of style. We are all tempted to do the selfish thing from time to time, but acting in our own self-interest all the time can rip apart the fabric of our society. The last test is from James Scott Bell in his book Plot and Structure. It's called Hook, Line, and Sinker. The hook is to come up with an idea for the opener of the book that will grab the reader's attention while they are just browsing at a bookstore. Something that will drag them into your story and won't let go. The line in this case is a tagline, which is different from a log line. The log line gives you all the major elements of the story in one convenient package. A tagline grabs the reader and makes them curious. For example, investigating a mysterious transmission of unknown origin, the crew of a commercial spacecraft encounters a deadly life form. Could be the log line of the movie Alien. Sure, it might make you a little curious, but the tagline, "In space, no one can hear you scream," is much more ominous and compelling. Can you truncate your logline into a tagline that is short and snappy? And finally, the really hard part. What could make this idea sink? What are the disadvantages to pursuing this idea? Hopefully you can complete these tests for several ideas. Pick the idea with the most promise and put it in the comments for the show notes. Next time, we'll talk about how long man has relied on story and why. We'll also discuss story drivers and basic story structure. You'll use the basic structure to rough in your most promising idea before you start drafting. See you next week.